Hello, John.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah, we are on live now, John. And before
Okay.
going to start your session, I want to introduce you to our audience.
Okay.
Yeah. Captain Caudle retired from the Navy in 2013. After 30 years of service, he commanded the USS Oscar Austin, DDG-79, and USS San Jacinto CG-56, and received the US Navy League's Captain John Paul Jones Award for Inspirational Leadership in 2010. He has been named the Naval Institute and the Surface Navy Author of the Year, and his new book, Letters to Myself, is now available online in stores. You have done a great job, John, and the stage is all yours.
Okay, great. Are you going to show the slides from there?
Yes, John, yes.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity and for that introduction. My name is John Cordell. I'm retired U.S. Navy captain, retired back in 2013. And I am talking today about my perspective. So my career spanned the time from about 1980 till about 2015. And during that time, I served in various capacities as in the Navy, we call it a division officer. That's sort of a first level leader manager. Then as a department head, that's a middle level manager in command, and then in major command. So sort of like the captain of a ship and then the captain of a larger ship. And coincidentally, my career sort of paralleled the changes in the U.S. Navy that allowed women to serve in all, like they can now today, in all combat positions. And as with any sort of changes in those domains, there are certain pioneers that sort of kick open the doors for everybody else. And it turns out that a lot of those folks were people that I served with. And so the discussion today is about leadership, specifically women leaders in the United States Navy. And I can only there's so many, but I can only highlight a few. And I kind of chose a few that I've interacted with and have some knowledge of and can talk to. And then, of course, the presentation should probably only take about a half hour, and then I have time for any questions or comments. I'm sure we can figure out how I can see them. I think in the chat, or else Melinda can read them off. So that's me. And now I'm in retirement, and I try to share my lessons with others, and that's what this is about. Just kind of as an aside, and you'll see this running in parallel, I'm publishing a book here called Letters to Myself, which sort of recounts this journey. Um, my grandfather wrote me a letter when I joined the Navy in 1980 that sort of inspired me as I was having when I had some tough times. And I thought to myself, what if I had gotten that inspiration at each stage in my career? And so a little bit of background here. That was the premise of the book, and that's kind of the background of this discussion. So kind of weaving two stories, my career with those of women. So let's start at the beginning. In the 1970s, a future Secretary of the Navy published an article called "Women Can't Fight." In the United States Naval Institute proceedings, which basically said that women didn't belong in combat or on Navy ships. Um, that didn't sit well with a lot of women who were serving in various capacities in the Navy. And one, Petty Officer Yona Owens, sued the Navy and said that there were trained people ready to go and that we should use them. A federal judge basically took the initiative and ruled that women should be allowed to serve at sea. And then that's when this article came out from James Webb. This was also in parallel with as I entered the Naval Academy in 1980 and became a plebe, they call it, a first-year freshman. And it was just a couple of years before the first class, I think, was 1979. So just right before my class started was the first time that women were allowed in the United States Naval Academy. So that was the background that we were looking at. Next slide. Okay, in the 1980s, women began to graduate from the Naval Academy. The first qualified female surface warfare officer was Billy Crawford. Women were first assigned enlisted. So in the Navy, you have officers who are more the supervisors, and enlisted are more the petty officers that do the watchstanding and much of the maintenance and things like that. And so there were different rules for officers and enlisted. There often are depending on the specialty. In 1983, Captain Colleen Nivius was the first female pilot to be selected for test pilot school, which is the Navy's elite training. And Ensign Christine Holderite, a classmate of mine from the Naval Academy, was the first female valedictorian. Um, Catherine Sullivan was the first woman to walk in space in 1984, and Roberta Hazard was the first unrestricted line. We call in the Navy, if you serve on ships, that's unrestricted. And she was the first to make flag officer or admiral in the Navy. So some pretty significant milestones right out of the gate after the changes in the law in 1979. Next slide. Okay, the 1990s, things picked up with the first female commanding officer of a Navy ship. She wrote several articles about this and has some great stories to tell. Um, Lieutenant Paula Coughlin, not all the integration went smoothly. Tailhook, if you're familiar with naval history, the United States was a scandal with sexual assault charges against many aviators, against 83 women and 7 men during this convention in Las Vegas. It really changed the Navy's perception and many of the rules concerning women at sea and women as pilots and in the Navy. The National Defense Authorization Act is sort of our congressional way of making laws about the military, and created a commission and also repealed the exclusion of women on combat ships. So in the United States Navy, we have kind of two groups of ships. One are the more support ships like oilers and ammo ships and things like that. The other are combatants like frigates, destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and so they changed the law in 1991 to allow women on all ships. In 1996, Wendy Lawrence, who was a first-class midshipman during my time at the Naval Academy, and the daughter of one of the superintendents of the Naval Academy, became the first woman to pilot the space shuttle Endeavour. That's a picture of her there. During this time, I was in my division officer tour, sort of my first management tour, and then my department head tour. And so that was kind of the middle of my career, if you will, sort of the beginning to the middle. And also you can see the transition there. Next slide. So in my book, I talk about some of the things that I learned to prioritize, and I think a lot of these were inspired by either other leaders that I worked for or women that I worked with. But I want to start with one of the most important. We often start, and I'll get to this, warfighting tactics and technical expertise. But I had a friend one time, a mentor of mine, that said he was talking about commanding a ship, and said that normally we learn shipmate, self. Put the ship first, then the shipmate, and then yourself. When you get to a commanding position, then you have to flip that on its head. You have to take care of yourself first. And so what I tell every naval officer that I talk to, every business person that I talk to, prioritize your own physical and mental fitness. I call it mental fitness instead of mental health, because mental fitness implies that you actually do things just like you do physical exercise. You do things to improve your mental fitness, things like meditation or doing music or whatever works for you to sort of keep yourself in a good place for the tough times. Don't be afraid to seek help. That's a lot of stigma in the Navy even now, but it's gotten a lot better. Build a routine, right? I normally like to work out in the mornings. Some people like to do it in the afternoons, but if you make it a routine, you're more likely to do it. Sleep. Not talking about it in detail in this broadcast, but my career was built largely, my second half of my career, prioritizing and changing the Navy's policy on sleep. I always tell people, if you want to improve your health for free, get an extra 30 minutes of sleep each night. And so sleep and sleep hygiene is incredibly important when you're looking. And then lastly, I had a friend of mine retire recently, and he said that he was really having a rough time because he had zero hobbies, no outside activities that he was interested in. And for me, playing guitar, painting, have always been things I like to do. Woodworking, so I'll cultivate something to bridge that gap between the stressful work environment and the home environment. Those are some ideas. And the picture there kind of emphasized that. That's my old ship, Oscar Austin, escorting the USNS Comfort, which is a Navy hospital ship through the Strait of Gibraltar, I believe. And I see a couple of questions. If you don't mind, I'll sort of answer them as I go, and I'll circle back at the end, just in the interest of time and break my train of thought here. Okay, let's move to the 2000s on the next slide. So I told you it's not all great. Um, that we had a couple of hiccups. The first woman to command a destroyer in the history of the Navy actually didn't do a great job. She went on to be a cruiser commander and then eventually was fired for cruelty. Leadership comes in good and bad, in male and female. And that was just want to be fair that not everything is great. Rear Admiral Tyson became the first woman to command a carrier strike group. If you're watching the news today, for context, you might hear the terms the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group and the Ford Strike Group over in the Gulf. That is a carrier with all of this 5 to 7 surface combatants, about 5,000 to 10,000 people, and this was the first time that a female admiral had become the head of that group. Commander Monica Washington Stoker became the first African-American woman to take command of a naval guided missile destroyer. Monica was my fire control officer when I served as an executive officer on USS Cole, and a fantastic leader, and great to see her be the person that broke the ice on that one. Michelle Howard, a great. When you ask me which women Navy leaders inspire you the most, I would probably say Michelle is at the top of the list. She overcame prejudice, as a black woman, lots of obstacles tossed in her way, and she took the complaints. She was on a ship where the commanding officer actually had voiced his displeasure at having women serving on the ship. And she actually asked to go speak to him behind closed doors. And when she laid out what she had been hearing and what he had been saying, he actually realized that it was more about things he had sort of learned but not really experienced, and he changed his behavior. And so she said that he was actually happy that she came forward because nobody had been brave enough to speak up before. And so I think a key lesson there, and one that she taught me, is don't suffer in silence. If you have something to say, don't let yourself be put down or demeaned by someone who has a perhaps biased opinion of your capabilities. Take them on, ask them why they feel that way, and prove them wrong. Okay, so Michelle Howard, I would say, to answer the first question, is probably the most inspirational, and she continues to inspire. She's out, retired now, but mentoring sailors and speaking publicly and really being and telling her story, which is very important. Okay, next slide. So technical proficiency. I am a nuclear power trained officer, which means that I serve on submarines and surface ships that are powered by nuclear reactors. And I've learned that process and manage the folks that run those reactors. And a couple of things I learned there is that if you want to be a good manager, if you want to be a good leader, you have to develop technical proficiency. What do I mean by that? You have to understand how the system works. And this applies to a Navy ship, but I think it also applies to a bank or an AI company or a startup or a business like Amazon or Netflix or whatever. If you don't understand how the system works, you can't manage it. Um, the other thing is you're not going to know everything. Seek out the experts and listen to them. One of my stories in a book I talk about is my first chief came up to me. I was actually drawing some sketches of some of you had to memorize the flow paths of some of the fluid systems. And I was using a pen, and he literally walked up and grabbed the pen out of my hand, and he said, you don't know enough to use a pen yet. Here's a pencil that you can erase your mistakes. So seek out those experts. Point, read, operate is kind of a Navy term, but it's really about before you take an action, point with your finger at the action, read the instructions, make sure you understand what's going to happen, and then take the action. And that goes into the last point of thinking through possible outcomes. Before you take an action, ask yourself, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? And what are the other options? And that all hinges upon your technical proficiency. And that's that's an AM additive manufacturing bust of Admiral Hyman Rickover, who was the father of the nuclear Navy. And he was very much renowned for his technical proficiency. Okay, next slide. When I think of technical proficiency, I have to think of one of the first female naval officers on submarines, Andrea Howard. If you follow the Navy, there's an institution called the U.S. Naval Institute, which publishes a magazine called Proceedings. And Andrea wrote about her experiences as one of the first naval officers on a submarine. Submarine is a very closed community, very, very specialized, very elite, and only brought in women in the early, 2000s. I think Andrea is going to be the first captain of a submarine. We'll see. But she certainly has the technical knowledge. And so she talks about in her article that crew reactions ranged from just treating us like anyone to some very awkward or maybe knowingly, sometimes inadvertently interactions, even to the point of actively subverting our success. And so you heard that from Admiral Howard. You heard it from Andrea Howard. The reaction to women leadership um, is uh, is varied. Okay, I think it's a much better. I mean, remember this is 15, 20 years ago. So we've come a long way, but that was her experience. That's a picture of her conning a United States submarine as one of the first women to do so. Next slide. Tactical proficiency. That's a picture of me. I think it's USS Oscar Austin launching Tomahawks back in Operation Iraqi Freedom, very similar to what the ships are doing now today. I'm the guy in the background there with the glasses. So tactical proficiency is more about, I talked about technical is the what. I would call tactical the how. You can never know enough. Keep learning. You don't win by running away. Be bold, take steps forward. Competence, this is from the Navy SEALs. Competence breeds competence. The latter without the former is dangerous. In other words, if you're overconfident, but you don't have that baseline of competence, you could be in trouble and you could have trouble for other people. Practice, practice, practice. My friend, Captain Kirk Lippold, commanded USS Cole, and they were attacked in 2000 by terrorists, and the ship was almost sunk. And I remember one of the crew members telling me the captain just drove us drill after drill after practice, and we wanted to kill him, right? Because he was just driving us crazy. And then we were attacked, and all of that training kicked in, and we saved our ship. Um, that last quote is very, very true in the Navy, in the military. Maybe not so much true, but some areas it could be. If you lose, you could die, right? Your life might depend on it. If you're in a safety-related field, like trucking industry or aviation, it absolutely could be true. And so that's why it's so important to have that tactical proficiency to understand how things work. Okay, next slide. Okay, back in getting closer to modern times, 2020 is the first female captain of an aircraft carrier was Amy Bauernschmidt, and she is now a flag officer, so that she went to the next level of command. You probably all, not maybe not everybody, but many of you might have seen the movie Top Gun or the sequel with Maverick. The first female Top Gun instructor was in 2022, Lieutenant Brianna Plahaki. You can see a picture of her there. And then Admiral Yvette Davis in 2023 became the first woman appointed as the superintendent of the Naval Academy, which I attended back in the 1980s. So some pretty amazing milestones. Okay, next slide is going to answer the question from Fatima. So we can go to the next slide. Leading diverse teams. Shown in the photograph are two great friends of mine and fantastic examples of leadership. On the right is a gentleman named Keith Green. He wrote a book called Black Officer, White Navy. He was one of the first Black officers in the Navy back in the late 70s. Next to him is Captain Janet Days, who was the first female commanding officer of the Naval Station Norfolk. She had command of a destroyer, just like Monica Stoker did, Washington. And then she went on to command the Navy's, actually the world's largest naval base, as the first African American and the first female. So here's some things I learned. I had two command tours, and the United States Navy is a very, very diverse organization. Whether it's you're talking about race, you're talking about gender, it's you never know what the crew is going to be made up of. And so a couple of things I would point out to folks. Your perspective is unique, but it's not the only one. I think that's probably the most important point on this slide is understanding. Learn to ask questions. I got an email yesterday where they talked about one of my former crew members. Oops, I lost the feed. Can you still see me there? Can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me okay? Sorry, can anybody jump in and tell me if you can hear me or chat? Okay, thank you. Sorry, it looked like it lost me there for a second. Um, but I'm back. So leading diverse teams, I would say the number one thing, I don't know, can you go back to that slide for a second? Um, is listen and ask questions. This person told me that he remembered what he remembered about me as a captain is I wouldn't go back and bother people, but I would sit down and ask them questions about what they were doing. Um, the uh, the other piece is, read the history and learn from it. I think so many times we don't understand the perspective of history from someone else's perspective, and so whether it's biographies or whether it's historical novels, go back and understand. Don't judge a book by its cover. That person, if you don't go beyond skin deep by the person's gender or color or whatever, you're going to miss out on so much. And then circling back to the first bullet, as the individuals that I talk about here. It's amazing how one person can change your life. My interaction with Keith Green led me to understand the challenges he had, and he's the one that sort of kicked me in the rear end to write the book because he wrote one and he said, "If I can do it, you can too." So, the key to diversity, I think, is listening and understand each person brings something different to the table, and then making an inclusive environment where they can contribute to the team. Okay, next slide. Someone asked Elizabeth about the next milestone for the Navy. At the top of the list is actually we met this one, the Chief of Naval Operations. Not a classmate of mine. I think she was one class away, but I worked with her. Lisa Franchetti became the first Chief of Naval Operations. That's the highest. That's like in Britain, the Sea Lord, if you will, the highest admiral in charge of the Navy, and she started too with a captain who said, "I don't want women on my ship, and I'm going to make sure you don't succeed." Well, she proved him wrong. She succeeded and just worked harder and made sure that she wasn't gonna let him stop her. And she rose to the pinnacle of the Navy and became for several years, the Navy's top leader. Um, Next slide. So what's next? There's really two milestones that we see that are actually the only ones that I know of, leadership forum who have not been held by women. That's the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, which is a prior enlisted, the highest level of enlisted sailor in the United States Navy, and one who sort of is the voice of the fleet towards the upper leadership of the Navy. Have not had a female in that position yet, and we just had a new one come in. It's a 4-year position, so that's going to be a while. And the first commanding officer of a nuclear submarine. And I think I laid out, my career. I was a department head back in the 90s, and then took command in the 2000s. So the folks who started in 2011 won't come into the window to command the submarine until about 2027, 2028. And so those are really quite literally the last two um, actual positional milestones that that are out there still. When I put this slide deck together, a friend of mine, Barbara Bell, who wrote a book about flight lessons, she was one of the first Navy test pilots. She had a great quote in her book um, that said, some leaders are born women. I think that kind of sums up the message here is that for good or bad, leadership is not about color, race, gender. It's about listening to your people. It's about technical competence. It's about tactical competence, proficiency. It's about taking care of yourself, and it's about taking care of your people. And so those are some of the lessons that I try to pass on. Um, and I think that answers, I think I sort of stumbled upon the answers to the three questions in the chat. And just to the last slide, if anyone wants to connect with me and discuss more, I offer up LinkedIn, where I met Melinda and started the path to this engagement today. It's always fun to be part of this and get out there. If you want to know more about this topic or discuss anyway, my Gmail account is there. And if you're interested in the book, there's a QR code on this slide, and you can go to Stone Tower Press and just find letters to myself. It actually just started. It went to the printers actually yesterday. So they should be starting to mail out copies here within a couple of weeks. Um, and that pretty much is a collection of letters that sort of go over the points that I made. I picked out 2 or 3 chapters from the book for this presentation to tie them to the women leaders that I knew. So I think that wraps up what I wanted to broadcast today. It's been a fantastic career, facilitated by some great leaders and some great leaders who were women. And so I salute the folks that put this broadcast together and the other speakers, and more power to you. And thank you for putting out your messages today. At this point, I'll stop and stand by to see if there's any questions.
Yes, John, thank you for so much for this informative presentation. And we have a few questions from our audience, John.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to ask you one of them. What advice do you have for young women leaders?
For women leaders?
For young women leaders, what advice do you have?
Oh, um, so I would say, the first advice is get to know your people, right? Get to know whoever it is. You can't lead without somebody following, and they're not going to follow you if they don't think you care about them, you don't think you understand them. Um, I was just mentioning, I think it came when I got lost my train of thought there for a second, but just yesterday on Facebook, a former sailor of mine posted that he remembered that what he remembered about me was that I was always walking around the ship, and that I came down and watched them do some maintenance, and just asked them questions about what they were doing so I could learn how they were doing it. And then that he really appreciated the leadership showing an interest in what he was doing. So um, listen to your people, take care of your people, and they'll follow you just about anywhere.
Thank you, John. And we have one more question. What is the next milestone for women in the Navy?
So I think the biggest one we had the chief of the Navy, naval operations, and I think that would be could happen again, but we've met that one. The captain of a submarine. If you watch the news today, I think we saw that a submarine had actually sunk an Iranian ship. First time since World War II. So submarines are very important, but we've never had a woman command a Navy submarine. So that's the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering the questions, John, and thank you so much for a valuable time today.
Thank you.
Please be on the backstage and join the next session, John.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.